It's the Growing for Market podcast.
A lot of farmland investment is considered an asset class, right? So it's like from a financial perspective, could be a little gross for farmers, right? Like to think of land as like an asset class and as like a hedge, right? It's almost like gold or silver. You kind of have it in your portfolio so that when the stock market goes down, you have this hedge, or so it's like a financial mechanism, and the goal of that kind of management of farmland as an asset is just to get a return, right? A stable return, a safe return, and to make money off of it, right? And so I think Jacob's insight was like, well, there's a lot of tools used in that system that if they were leveraged and pointed towards the goal of getting farmers on land, right? And making farmer ownership the point, not like maximizing returns, not kind of having this consistent financial like vehicle, like instead of using all these tools that basically don't care about the farmer, but instead focusing them on the farmer, like there's a lot of value that you can create, right? And you can share that value with farmers, and you can make land more accessible, and you can create this pathway to ownership where it wouldn't exist.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing flowers and vegetables for local markets. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine, proudly celebrating 35 years in 2026 as the magazine by and for vegetable and flower market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. If you grow for market, you know performance is everything. That's why so many farmers are turning to Burpee's Farmers Market. Dedicated to professional growers, Burpee is now offering non-GMO seeds in larger quantities, bred and selected for standout flavor, strong yields, and the kind of visual appeal your customers crave. All farmers market varieties are trialed at Burpee's research farm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, where expert horticulturalists test for germination rate, vigor, disease resistance, high yield, and consistency, things that make a difference in the field and to your bottom line. The seed assortment includes USDA certified organic varieties, Burpee bred classics, heirlooms, and exciting new introductions. Burpee's been doing this for 150 years, and they're still creating new varieties with growers like you in mind. You can check out the full lineup at burpee.com/farmersmarket. That's burpee.com/farmersmarket. This episode is sponsored by Nifty Hoops. Nifty Hoops designs and builds high tunnel systems for growers who want dependable results. What stands out is that Nifty Hoops tunnels are complete systems designed by experienced builders with the details worked out ahead of time. That means the core components are included from the start, like end walls, ventilation, doors, baseboards, and double-layer poly, rather than being added later. The tunnels are designed for real wind and snow loads, efficient assembly, and long service life. You can choose a self-build kit with guidance from written manuals and videos, or a community build where Nifty Hoops works alongside you and the project gets completed in one day. Nifty Hoops has built more than 1,500 hoop houses across the country, including many funded through the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative. They're known nationwide for predictable outcomes and ongoing support. If you're planning a high tunnel project and want it done right, you can learn more at niftyhoops.com. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Martín Lemos to the Growing for Market podcast. Martín is the Director of Impact and Agriculture at Dirt Capital Partners, which invests in land in partnership with regenerative farmers. Martín has an extensive background in both farming and investment, but I'd much rather hear about it from him. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Martín.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you reached out to us because this is an interesting subject. And I know scaling up and access to land in the first place is always a huge topic for farmers. So when you got a hold of me, I thought something I would love to discuss. So Reading your bio, it looks like you have an interesting and unusual background in both farming and investment. I guess I say that because I don't know very many farmers, or any perhaps, that have backgrounds in investment. So, which came first for you, the farming or the interest in investing?
Oh, yeah, definitely the farming. Yeah, I didn't think I knew much about investing or PowerPoints or Excel spreadsheets for a while, other than, making crop plans. Yeah, I started off as a farmer. I actually grew up in the country of Uruguay, and my grandparents had a little homestead, and kind of I knew that kind of rural community and just always loved the kind of farming community. And we moved to the States when I was fairly young and moved to New Jersey and kind of go back to Uruguay summers, and kind of just like really appreciated that lifestyle, but I just didn't think it was part of like what was in the cards in the US, and especially growing up around Newark and Elizabeth, like just was different landscapes, and so I think in college, kind of went back and, I think under various influences, like was started to get curious about like what it would look like to farm in the US and like what that landscape was like. And so this is back in 2003. I think Atra, had a website where you could like find farms that were looking for like summer work. And so I ended up doing a season in New Mexico with these farmers, Sebastian and Kelly Aguilar. And yeah, just fell in love with it. They were doing biodynamic farming, which was like new to me at that point too. So,
They have summertime seeds now?
yeah, I think that they've moved into seed production and they're doing amazing work now too. So yeah, I've been just very fortunate. Like I got to meet a lot of amazing farmers.
Sebastian was on the podcast a couple months ago.
That's how I've reached out. I was like, oh, I saw Sebastian. I was like, listen, yeah, yeah.
Oh, such a small world. So cool to have that connection. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, yeah. Like I think, it is a small world, obviously. So, I just fell in love with farming through that season and decided to kind of pursue it. And I think my next kind of stint was working outside of Portland, Oregon. I went to this farm called Salvie Island Organics I was being managed at the time by Josh Folk and
Oh, yeah.
Tanya Murray and Zoe Bradbury, and who are all amazing farmers. So I'm very fortunate to have learned from a lot of just incredible farm and land stewards.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, so just kind of kept going with it, and kind of did that route of being an apprentice, an assistant manager, a manager. And at some point, I ended up managing a 50-acre farm outside of Chicago. It was when I was there, 100 CSA member farm. And when I left, it was about, 500 members. And we were doing some deliveries and donating quite a bit to local food banks. So I think my last season was like 2013. So yeah, I spent like about a decade, farming and mostly vegetable production, mostly kind of CSA, market, wholesale, restaurant accounts. Yeah, so that was kind of my entry into this work was just being on the ground and being a farmer and living that experience. And then, as I got more into it, I think I learned more about the economic side of things and just got more curious about how farms can make it work and what it would look like to be successful and what does the economics of all this, how does it pan out? And so I got a little bit more interested in kind of the strategy, kind of systems approach of things, right? And like understanding like, how do we need to move capital so that more farmers can make it? I think I certainly felt like as a young farmer, I was like hitting a little bit of a wall as as managing a farm, just and not having a lot of like wealth to draw on, right? Like no wealth to draw on. And just the idea of like finding land and starting another farm on my own. And like that whole process seems so daunting. So that was for me, like hitting a little bit of a wall. And so I just was really curious about how I can help make that obstacle, that challenge a lot easier for other folks, right? So I did some work overseas and then I did some work in sustainability consulting and kind of got more into the investing side of the world and just tried to understand a little bit more like how we can translate what farmers need to what like capital has and like how do we bridge a little bit more of those two worlds in such a way that we can support young farmers like myself and folks like that I knew growing up and had knew like farming that, how do we make it that pathway to ownership and like a long-term like farm career more viable, right?
Yeah, well, that's so important because I know, like, that's kind of what my wife and I did. We just moved around the country working on farms, called it doing the apprentice circuit. And then the question at the end of that time becomes, you're like, it's kind of like, okay, so you want to start a farm? Like, so if you don't already have a farm in the family or are independently wealthy, like, where does the land come from? And there's lots of creative solutions out there, but I'm very curious to hear the lending and part you're working on. Well, so because I read your bio that you are the co-executive director of the National Young Farmers Coalition, I wanted to ask you just quickly about that before we get to the investing, because that's an organization many of our listeners may be familiar with, since we've had co-founder Lindsay Lusher Shute on the podcast a couple times at this point. So, can you just tell us whatever you want about the National Young Farmers Coalition in like your time there?
Yeah, well, if you've had Lindsay on, I mean, Lindsay's the genius behind it. I think just kind of making this idea of how do we give a voice to this generation of young farmers, and how do we carve out space in federal policy and local policy and state policy to support the needs of young farmers, and how do we help farmers become effective advocates in that sphere, right? In the sphere of like policymaking and legislation, and working with these other systems that have impacts on their farm, but often seem very far away or very labyrinthine or just very difficult to access. And like, how do we create this coalition that is led by farmers and supports the needs of farmers? So, I think she's just so brilliant in what she was able to put together and build. And I was able to connect with Lindsay. Actually, I was talking with a farmer friend of mine, and I was living in Queens, New York, and I'm kind of complaining a little bit about the world of sustainability consulting, and just sustainability in general, and the approach to agriculture, and this sort of blind spot it had for like how difficult it was for young farmers and farmers of color, and kind of like all the inequities in the food system. And there was such a focus on the climate side of it, but not anything else, right? It was just focused on like, well, how do we change one farm that's conventional to organic, and that'll be a big win, as opposed to thinking like, well, here's all these big challenges that are facing, right? And like, we eventually will need people to do this work, and we have a system that makes it really difficult to get into it and to sustain a career in it. And they recommended reaching out to Lindsay. So I reached out to Lindsay, and at that point she was looking for a deputy director. She had been kind of germinating the idea of farm generations, and I think was wanting to see where that would go. And so I joined in 2018, and Lindsay decided to dedicate more of her energy to farm generations and grown by. And I became co-executive director with my colleague, Sophie Ackhoff, who's just this brilliant organizer and campaigner and strategist who had been working with Lindsay since the very beginning. And yeah, so we led the organization, or were on staff of the organization, and served as co-executive directors for 4 years. Yeah, got some big wins on the COVID relief efforts and kind of like making that more accessible to diversified operations and younger farmers. Did a lot of work to try to raise the cause for racial justice in the food system, and trying to elevate the work and the voices of farmers of color. And I think my role was just like kind of having mostly a farm background and a little bit of like this business background. Was just because what I knew best was like how to grow things, right? And so this is an organization that when I joined, it was like very scrappy, and like I think there's always this inclination among nonprofits to talk about like punching above their weight, right? Which, as somebody who likes boxing, I think is like just a weird analogy, because like you don't necessarily want to be characterized as by punching above your weight. Like, especially if you're going up against like heavyweights like big ag and all the corporate interests that determine like farm policy, like you want to be able to like hold your own, right? And I think my role was just kind of like, how do we build this organization to like be resourced and have the capacity to really deliver on the impacts that these farmers wanted, right? Like, how do we create change around like land policy? How do we create change around access to food? And so during my time, I was mostly focused on kind of supporting our amazing staff and our coalition of farmers, and giving them the resources and capacities they need to succeed. So we grew about our budget by like five times. We had, when I joined, we were like 14 staff, and I left, it was about 40 plus staff. We had more folks in DC. So we were able to like have more of an influence and like give more, like really amplify the voice of farmers even more. So like really just building on the amazing legacy of Lindsay. And I think was really grateful to work for this coalition of the farmers who are really dedicated and would give their time to talk to Congress people, would go to DC. And then we had this amazing staff. And like as I mentioned, Sophie was just a brilliant campaign strategist and was able to get some big policy wins. So that was kind of my role there, was just to help it grow, right? And I think to like take that idea and like all that amazing infrastructure that was already built and kind of like help it scale to meet, the demands of the farmers that, the coalition represented.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that's a lot of growth. And yeah, so National Young Farmers Coalition, great organization. People should check it out if they're not familiar. So thanks for that in helping to grow that. Okay. So let's talk about Dirt Capital Partners. Can you just give us the background on Dirt Capital Partners, like how long it's been around and, where it came from?
Yeah, so it's been around since 2014, so just over 10 years at this point. And it was founded by my colleague, Jacob Israelo. Jacob was actually, I got introduced to Jacob because he was on the board of National Young Farmers Coalition. And so I kind of knew him from that time and kind of really enjoyed working with him and really enjoyed his perspective. I think he was somebody who was really committed to local food systems, particularly around like Hudson Valley, and supporting farmers in the Northeast, at least during that time. And, the way he was doing it was bringing this kind of real estate background in service of, at that point, sustainable farmers, regenerative farmers, whatever you want to call it, like best in class farmers that were like doing good for the soil and good for their communities, right? And I think he was really astute about bringing this expertise in how do you like manage a real estate transaction? How do you structure, a project, a financial model for a real estate acquisition? And how do you do that in service of the farmer, right? I think a lot of farmland investment is considered an asset class, right? So it's like from a financial perspective, it's could be a little gross for farmers, right? Like to think of land as like an asset class and as like a hedge, right? It's almost like gold or silver. You kind of have it in your portfolio so that when the stock market goes down, you have this hedge, or so it's like a financial mechanism, and the goal of that kind of management of farmland as an asset is just to get a return, right? A stable return, a safe return, and to make money off of it, right? And so I think Jacob's insight was like, well, there's a lot of tools used in that system that if they were leveraged and pointed towards the goal of getting farmers on land, right, and making farmer ownership the point, not like maximizing returns, not kind of having this consistent financial like vehicle, like instead of using all these tools that basically don't care about the farmer, but instead focusing them on the farmer, like there's a lot of value that you can create, right? And you can share that value with farmers, and you can make land more accessible, and you can create this pathway to ownership where it wouldn't exist. I think one of the things that is such a challenge for farmers is like farmers are so expert on so many things, right? You like live through so many seasons, you know how to grow vegetables, like you have all this experience over time, right? But you at best will have one farmland transaction, right? And so you go into this like project like with such a relative lack of experience relative to like what right? Like it's your first time buying a piece of farmland, right? Like it's your first time dealing with like a bank. It's your first time getting a mortgage. And so like there's a little bit of like just a difficulty in accessing that in a way that with the same sort of comfort and level of expertise you bring to everything else on your farm, right? And so I think what their capital really is all about is like helping to bring that expertise to farmers and making that available so that when they're in this like land search process, they have this like experienced operator who knows how to like structure these transactions, is able to create financing models that fit for the farm and create this pathway to ownership that I think is what otherwise might not be available because other lenders wouldn't be available for farmers.
Okay. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. It might take money to make money, but an on-farm event is the only marketing channel where the customer pays you to show up. Think about it. 30 people at a $20 U-Pick is $600 before anyone's even heard about your farm stand, CSA, or workshop series. On Farmhand, you sell tickets that instantly collect a name, email, and phone right at checkout. So you're not just making sales, you're building a list you can sell to for years. Farmhand handles the ticketing, the caps, the reminders, the QR check-in, and the follow-up emails. Free to start, you only pay when a ticket sells. See how it works at farmhand.partners/GFM. And now, back to the show. So would other lenders not be available for it because they don't think there's enough money in it? Or how does the approach of Dirk Capital Partners differ from, say, like your average bank? Or like, I know nothing about finance and investment. So like, you just tell me, like, I'm not sure if that's even the right way to ask the question, but I think you.
No, like, why don't farmers just use other lenders, basically, right? It's like the question,
That's.
or why don't other lenders do this? And I think part of it for a lot of the farmers that we work with, who are often like first generation farmers that don't have existing land bases, don't own other property, right? And maybe their business is starting out, they're in year 3 or 4, right? You show up to a bank, the bank kind of evaluates you at that moment, right? They look at your balance sheet and it's like, well, you don't have that much collateral, right? Or like, oh, you can maybe grow your CSA, but maybe I don't even know what a CSA is. I'm like skeptical that you can grow it. And at any rate, I'm not really going to hold those projections to I'm not going to give that much weight, right? They evaluate you where you're at. And I think we come in and like evaluate you at like where you think you could go, right? Like what you think the business could be. And so a conventional lender might say like, well, that property is like, you can't afford the mortgage at this moment, right? Like your business can sustain it. And what we could do is structure our model or our project with you in such a way that you can afford it. Like we could do a lease to purchase so that you're just leasing the farmland. You're leasing it at maybe the initial like 3 years at a rate that's like more manageable as you're scaling up. So you have more working capital to invest in the land. You have a purchase option typically at like year 5 or 10. So like maybe at that point, your business has really grown to a point like one of those conventional lenders will come in and say like, oh, you've actually been doing this for 5-10 years. Like, of course, slam dunk, we could do this, right? We structure our projects in such a way that we are, especially for the lease to purchase agreements, we have set purchase prices into the leases, right? So like at year 5 or year 10, this is what the purchase price will be. And it's basically what it costs at the purchase time, at the time of purchase for us, plus like a minor appreciation rate. So basically when it's time for you to purchase it, you get it appraised because land values have generally gone up pretty significantly. Like it's usually, your purchase price is usually below the appraised value. So like, again, that's super enticing for a conventional lender. And then there's other things that we do as part of the project, which like is very different from a lender. A lender is very hands off, right? Like you do underwriting, you either get the loan or you don't. And if you get the loan, like you're not going to check in with the bank very often. And if you do, it's because you need some like flexibility and they're going to be like very grumpy with you about it. And they're like, if anything, they're just checking in that like things aren't deteriorating and that's it. Like you'll maybe get a monthly bill and maybe a couple of newsletters, but like that's it. That's like your standard of communication. Like we're actively like working with the farmers that we're partnering with. About 2/3 of our projects have a conservation easement component, for example. So like we're working with land trusts alongside our farmers to see if we can get an easement on the land. And that helps bring in proceeds that will then lower the purchase price as well. So like any proceeds we get from selling the development rights on a property then go towards the purchase price. So if it's $1 million property, for example, and we get like $500,000 easement, like that purchase price or the cost base is offset by like 500,000. So we do like these kinds of parts of like projects within our portfolio that like they're meant to like generate some kind of return, right? To like entice investors to put money into this. But they're all kind of in service of making this land more affordable and potentially more attractive for a conventional lender to come in at some point and then give that mortgage to the farmer, right? Like we're not long-term landowners. Our idea is like we are kind of a bridge so that farmers can get to land ownership and much more active, like much more aware and much more, I think supportive of alternative farm businesses, right? Like I think it's very difficult for first generation farmers who don't have a land base, who have no collateral history, right? Like to come to a lender and say like, listen, I know I'm at like 100,000 in sales and like in my CSA, but I'm going to get to 200,000. And if I can get this property that, will allow me to grow more, it will give me like more opportunities to build more greenhouses, or like it's much closer to the markets that I already serve. Like I can really scale up this business. And for a lot of conventional lenders, they just don't see that, right? They just see that you have no collateral, and they think 100,000 is really small, whereas like 100,000 revenue for a CSA is like amazing, right? It's like such an achievement to get that far. So like we see that as like really experienced operators who have a history of managing land, and all that's missing is that maybe they're just leasing land. They have a really tenuous like land agreement at this point, right? Like they're just leasing from somebody who may sell it at some point, or if somebody dies in the family, then like things would change. It's just a really tenuous situation. But other than that, their businesses are really strong, right? And so we see that, and I think we kind of work with farmers to support them in that, in their vision, and kind of build that bridge for land ownership to them.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I never thought about like what you said about how most farmers are only going to buy the farm once or twice in a lifetime, and so that's probably one of the biggest financial transactions a farmer's ever going to enter into, and most of us don't really know anything about it. So it sounds like that's a really good thing to have somebody like Dirt Capital Partners who obviously you guys know what you're doing with the purchase and investment side of things to help out and be an interest for farmers. I'm wondering, so if you take on some projects that banks are not as interested in for whatever reason, does that mean you guys are making less money on the investment or taking bigger risks? Or like, how does that, it sounds like you're very different from most of the other people that would be investing in farmland. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we are what's considered like an impact first investor, right? And
Uh-huh.
so the way that our model works is that we pool funds from individuals and families and foundations and institutions, and use these funds to purchase farmland, and all of these projects generate a return. But the return is not just financial, is its impact, right? Like what the reason these institutions are putting money in is like, yeah, they don't want to lose money, but they are also want to support local food economies. They want to support regenerative farmers. They want to support that pathway to ownership for farmers. And so they're willing to accept what we call a below market return for some of that impact return plus like the financial return. So like basically what we're doing is taking some of that investment funding and some of the kind of upside of farmland investing and like sharing that with the farmers, right? Like making it more affordable for the farmers. Like we still, in order to entice this kind of capital, we still have to generate some kind of return, right? And it's usually
Yeah, sure.
like more of what's considered like a wealth preservation strategy for folks putting money in. Like they're not going to lose money. Like we haven't lost money to date on any project, right? Because it's farmland. It's like, I think the myth of it being risky is something that like a lot of banks or a lot of folks try to put out there to like bring in this sort of fear and kind of like suggestion, but it's not. It's a pretty safe asset, right? The reason it's considered safe asset within a portfolio. Like, so there's a lot of like upside to each of these projects, as it were. And like, if we can share some of that with the farmers so that the land becomes more accessible, more affordable in the long term, and you have investors who are willing to share some of those returns with those farmers in exchange for getting some of those impact returns, like then it works out. And so like that, a lot of my role is kind of translating between investors and farmers, or like, what is the impact, right? And like, why is it important to put money to support this farm in Maryland, right? And like, and I could tell them like, oh, well, they're like amazing regenerative land stewards. They like do amazing things on kind of the way they manage their crops and the diversified operation. They also like have this community programming effort. They're like putting a lot of food into like the local food bank systems, like, and so like I can tell that story, and I think for investors, like that's part of what the return they're looking for. And so I think that's basically what it comes down to, is like we share some of those returns with farmers and like make that land more accessible, and the investors are willing to take that in exchange for like knowing that this money is being put to a use that supports some of their goals and mission.
Okay. Yeah. So it's people who want the money to go to a good use, it sounds like. Okay, so yeah, you were just telling us a little bit about what you do there. Yeah, can you like explain to us your role at Dirt Capital and how that fits into the larger scheme there?
Yeah. So my role is it's Director of Impact in Agriculture is my title. So it's even got a little ampersand in there. Yeah, so it's it's basically it's not that difficult. It's like when a farmer calls like Dirt Capital and like the finance team like asks to like know whether it works. Like I'm bringing in the perspective from like the farming side of like to understand this like farming business that's coming to us and looking for land, like just to understand like, well, how does the operation work? Like how are they managing the land? How are they managing the crops? How are they managing animals? Like what's their markets? How are they thinking about labor? How are they like engaging with the community, really understanding the project, not just from like the finance side, but from like the impact and like agronomic side, right? How does a farm actually work, right? And so my role is kind of support the investment side of things and kind of bring in that lens of like, well, not just beyond the numbers, like how does a farm actually operate, right? How are they managing the soil? How are they managing land? How are they stewarding the land? And then the other half of my job is, once we are working with farmers, I'm the main point of contact. So I'm the person on the call if they like need to, postpone payment for, whatever reason, or they're ready to like execute a purchase and they want help like putting together an application with FSA or whatever else comes up, right? Like there's a neighbor who's being annoying. There's a conservation easement transaction and like we're working with the land trust. And so I'm just helping to facilitate that along. We've got folks on staff who are amazing. Colleagues Dominic and Amanda are both really good on the investment side and then also really good on kind of the conservation finance side of things. But basically I'm kind of the liaison between farmers and investors as well, and kind of like being that translator on the impact side of things. So letting investors know like, oh, here's the project that your funding supported and here's what's happening on the ground. Here's what they're doing. And here's like the amazing returns that are coming from this farmer now having land they can invest in, right? They're able to put up, perennials. They're able to like bring in animals where before like their landlord wouldn't let them, or they're able to like put in a couple more hoop houses, or they're finally able to have like the programming for farmers that they've always wanted to have, but like maybe weren't allowed to because they didn't own the land or they didn't have the right to some of those amenities, right? So yeah, basically my role is like to serve as like one of the farmers on staff and supporting the farmers in our portfolio by kind of making it a smooth experience for them and kind of guiding them and navigating towards the moment in which they execute the purchase option or just outright own the property.
Oh, cool. Okay. So it sounds to me like you're the guy who has the farm experience, because I'm thinking if you must get approached by different kinds of projects, and it sounds like you know enough about farming to be able to tell them like, oh yeah, this has a really good the kind of impact, because like you're saying, if it's investing, they want to have a specific sort of like ag farmer positive outcome. You can look at the project and say like, oh yeah, this is legit, like this is going to be a really good thing for this farmer and community, or like maybe the impact of some other projects is limited or not as not really as good, to make sure those dollars go to the right place.
Yeah, I think just bringing in like that perspective, like I think it's a lot of folks on our team have a lot of like farming experience, but I think my role is just to bring in that lens. Like, yeah, as you say, like, somebody comes in and says like, oh, I need this property because I'm going to scale up. And I think just thinking through that logistically with them, right? It's like, well, can you double your CSA next year? Well, maybe. Like, I think just being a little bit of like kicking the tires, right, on a project, and also like just knowing what a farmer is getting into and like supporting them once they're in the project with us. So yeah, I think just bringing in that farming and impact approach to like our investment, because it's really integrated for us, right? So it's like we're not just looking at the financials, we're looking at the long-term impact of this farm having this additional land under management and pathway to ownership on this piece of land. What does it mean for the business? What does it mean for the land itself? Like, what does it mean for land to be stewarded by somebody who knows how to, for example, like convert conventional land to organic grain, or knows how to rotationally graze, animals on a piece of land that's been maybe hayed for a couple years, right? Like people that know how to steward land and manage land, and then also have like the business side of things to like support all of the work that kind of farming requires, right? So yeah, definitely just being one of the set of folks who just like reads the applications that come in and talks with those farmers and like make sure like they're looking at the right opportunity. And my colleague Amanda, like as you mentioned before, like just the transaction itself is so complicated usually, right? To like access a piece of land, and you have to deal with a seller, and you have to go through issues of title. You may need to like do inspections and all these things. And like, I think she's just really good at, from kind of her background, both in like in kind of the farming space, but also in commercial real estate, to like know which questions to ask, right? And know how to like push a seller and like make sure we get the best deal for the farmer. So I think we all bring these different like perspectives to this work, to all in service of like making sure the farmer picks a property and selects a property that's really going to work for them and their business, and like it's something that they are really going to benefit from, like having long-term access to.
Yeah. Well, that's very important. How do people find out about you guys? You know, if you're looking to link up capital with the farmers who need it, you know what, like, do you advertise, or like, how do people find you?
Yeah. Well, this is part of my advertising going on podcasts.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, please reach out. Direct Capital website. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it, we started off focused mostly in the Northeast, and now we're working across the US. And a lot of it really has been word of mouth. Like we'll work with one farmer and they'll tell their friends, and now we have like a cluster of projects, right? Like that's a little bit of what happened for us in like Maryland over the last couple of years. Like we had one farmer who reached out to us, one of their farmer friends heard about it, they reached out to us, and then like after a while you get a little bit of like this networking effect, right? And that's something we look for too in farmers, right? Like we want farmers who are like engaged in their community and like are supporting other farmers. A lot of our farmers in our current fund have these like food hub businesses as well. So like there's all this like connections like that they have with other farmers that like really goes a long way. So, I think that's one way that's been really successful, is just like word of mouth. And we occasionally go to like farmer conferences and share a little bit about our projects. But yeah, I think that's like, we're still trying to get the word out about our work. I think there's a whole host of like alternative lenders out there who are looking to support farmers and like bring in financing and bring in capital in ways that it's a little bit less extractive and more supportive of farm enterprises. And I think we're one of like many organizations doing that. And just definitely urge like folks on the call, if like you're looking at farmland, like, look at other options, right? Like beyond farm credit, like which farm credit has its uses, right? But like, there might be alternative lenders working near you, or like we're available to. Like, I think there's just much more than there was like 15 years ago when I was like farming. Like there's just a lot more resources and capital like interested in supporting smaller scale enterprises that are doing things that are a little bit outside of the norm, but really important. And so, that's been kind of our approach, is like a little bit of word of mouth and trying to get the word out there and just sharing a little bit of like the projects that like we've been doing. And I think it seems it's always such a like a little bit of a startling thing for farmers to hear about the way that we work, like I think they're so used to lenders who have like a very like rigid underwriting process, or they're just not that interested in small scale operations or diversified vegetable operations or organic or regenerative operations. And I think there's always just like kind of surprise that folks like Dirt Capital exist. But so we're trying to do more to get the word out of like our work and the fact that there are alternatives to some of the more conventional lenders out there.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully a few more people know about you after this podcast. And so where does the money come from? Like, is it in individuals who have money to invest and want it to go to a good ag-related project? Is it other institutions or lenders? Like, where does the money come from?
Yeah, so it's, I think wealth. So it's the individuals with money who are accredited investors. There's family offices. There's like foundations, right? So like foundations have endowments, right? So sometimes they can put some of their endowments to use into these kinds of funds, or they can do a direct, like as I was mentioning before, like a program-related investment as part of like their grant monies too. So that's basically it. It's a bunch of private funds. We pull together these funds, and we're now deploying on our fourth fund. We're about to raise our fifth fund. Our fifth fund, we're targeting around $100 million. And so that's the amount of money that we'll have available to support, projects. Yeah. So that, it's a kind of a array of different places that hold wealth, whether it's family offices or foundations or other kind of structures. But
Okay, so sounds like it comes from a few different sources.
yeah, it's a pretty good mix of like, I would say individuals, investment advisor groups, foundations.
Okay. Is there a metric that you measure the impact of Dirt Capital Partners in terms of number of projects funded or dollars loaned, or like what are the metrics for what you do?
That's a big part of my work, is kind of like translating and trying to put the work that we do into like numbers and metrics and ways that make sense to investors and just like appealing to investors. And also like I try to balance that with a little bit of like qualitative, right? So like we'll do annual impact reports, and you can find those on our website, which will go through like, number of acres conserved, or number of acres transitioned from conventional to organic, or the percentage of funding that's going through to like typically underserved communities, farmers, like farmers of color, like women-owned farms, young farmers. So there's a whole host of like metrics that we track. I think like the most critical metric is like the number of like exits to farmers, right? Like number of farmers that have like been able to successfully purchase the property. And like, as I said, we're still fairly young, only about 12 years in, but right now we've had about like 52 projects and about 17 exits. And of like those 17, I think 15 or so were to the original farmers that we worked with. So like, I think that's a big part of the way that we track the impact, is like, are we successful at this like idea that like if we give farmers the time on a property and give them the space to grow their businesses and the opportunity to like scale and try that business and get it to a place where it can like then be really investable by a more conventional lender who's like happy to give them a mortgage, like does that work, right? Like the farmers use that bridge, like do we buy them time for that, right? Like, I think that's the metric that we're tracking, and I think it's been successful so far. Like, I think there's a lot of active projects. Like, we just finished a project last week, right? That a farmer's been on there for 10 years, and they were able to finally get some financing from FSA and Vermont Veda to purchase a property. And so I think that's like the key metric for us. I think, as I said, I think we've had 52 active projects, or 52 projects that we've done through all of our funds, and we've had 17 exits. And I think the number of the original farmers may be like around 15 or maybe 14.
Yeah, that's great. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but is there a particular region you're focused on, or nationwide in the USA? Is that what you guys are?
Yeah, so we're nationwide now. We started with like our roots in Northeast, so doing a lot of like organic dairy in Northeast and diversified vegetable operations in Northeast. But now we're nationwide, and like a whole host of like different production types, right? Like we've got like citrus production in Florida, we've got like bison in like Montana, we've got organic grain in the Midwest, we've got continue to have like a lot of those really strong diversified vegetable and livestock operations around cities, right, that are like serving those city markets. So it's the geography has expanded, and like I think so like the kind of productions models that folks have too. So it's a lot more diversified at this point, just with that national scope.
Okay, cool. On your website, there's an impact framework that names priorities for the kinds of projects you want to work on. You don't have to go through the whole thing, but can you tell us, are there specific types of farmers or projects you're looking to collaborate on? I know you already said a little bit about this, but I'm thinking like if somebody's listening to this and thinking like, oh, would my project be a good candidate? Tell me if you already said what you wanted to say about the kind of projects you fund, that's fine. But is there anything else you wanted to say if people are trying to figure out if their farm or their project would be a good fit for Dirt Capital?
Yeah, I think we have some criteria that kind of determine like eligibility. I think some of that is 3+ years of operating history. So you've had a business. It's not like this is a new venture you're starting, like, but you've been running a farm business for a while. And we also accept if you've been managing a farm business too, like if you're a farm manager, like and you have experience like managing the profit and loss like on a operation as well, like that also counts. But like looking for operating history, so like that's one part of it. Usually looking for about like $200,000 plus in like annual revenue, and typically in terms of like our impact framework, like looking for farmers who are doing a lot of really good work on the kind of regenerative, sustainable, organic side of things. Really managing for for soil health, really maximizing for like the welfare and the well-being of their animals, thinking about like biodiversity on their farms, just all of that like kind of ecological stewardship. Also looking at the ways that they're engaged with their communities, right? Like, are they increasing food access for folks in around them, right? Like, are they doing some programming on their farms that like brings the public onto the farm? Are they doing work that supports other farmers? Like, they might have like a food hub, or they're like aggregating, or they're supplying farmers with starts, like whatever it may be. We kind of have a pretty broad perspective on regenerative agriculture, like not just looking at like, well, are they cover cropping? Like, we're looking at kind of the bigger picture of, are they kind of building this like food system, this like local food system that we want to see? Are they building a food system that is really accounting for soil and the health of the ecosystem, but also are they making some of those benefits of that farm available to other folks through like food access and like opportunities to like visit a farm and be on a farm, and like all the things that like I'm sure many of the farmers that are listening to this podcast like know about, right? Like all those different like facets of a farm that like often don't get accounted when you think about just the ecology of things, or just the environmental side of things. So, I think if you're interested in a property, I think it's always worth reaching out to us. And like, we might not be a good fit, but we will do some work and try to refer you to folks that might be. We are very supportive of like farmers who are in this position of like looking for land, and sometimes farmers come to us with like a property in mind, like they have a seller who's willing to sell to them, and like they are maybe in contract and are looking for financing. And then we've got farmers who are like, I don't have a property in mind yet, but like I know I need to because my lease is going to run up in a couple of years, or like I'm at this point where like I really need to find a new piece of land to grow my business, and like we can do some underwriting at that point too, and kind of get the wheels going. I mean, I think we had that earlier question, like talked about like what makes this different from a lot of like lenders. There's an incredible like public option, which is like FSA, right? I think one of the challenges that like many farmers face with FSA is just the timing of it, right? Like it can be a little bit difficult to go to a seller and say like, I think I can get financing from FSA. Just going to like, it might take 3 months or 4 months or maybe in 6 months. Like a lot of sellers might not be interested in that, right? Or it's like a really fast moving market, right? Like if you're doing like a CSA and like farmers market type operation, you're like usually in often like fairly wealthy areas or areas that have a lot of like real estate pressure. And so you're competing for that land with a lot of folks that maybe can put down a cash offer, or just like, it just puts you a little bit at a competitive disadvantage, right? To be a farmer bidding or trying to like purchase a property. So like, one of the things that we can do is like, we work at the speed of like real estate, right? We can move pretty quickly. And so even if you don't have a property in mind, we can do a lot of underwriting and kind of get to the point where like, once you find a property and we can help with that property search, like we can move pretty quickly and like manage the relationship with the seller and like do all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I would say, it's not necessarily critical that you have a property in mind, but like most times it is like a farmer coming to us and saying like, I have a lead on this property, can you help?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great that you guys can be nimble, because I know, I mean, on the one hand, it's like a farm can be anywhere. There are a lot of farms out in the middle of nowhere, but also given that this is a market farming podcast, people selling direct to the public need to be fairly close to the public. I know there's a lot of farmers in the GFM audience who are concentrated in around big population centers. So like you said, it may have development pressure, competing interests other than just farming. That's great that you guys can be nimble. Well, first of all, that's really the questions that I had for you. And so it sounds like you are looking for people to reach out to you. So I guess I just wanted to say, is there anything else that you wanted to say? Like, talk to the audience. Is there anything else you wanted to say about reaching out to you guys, or anything else I should have asked you that you'd like to add before we let you go?
Yeah, no, I think just reaching out to us, I think is like great. I mean, we have a inquiry form on our website, and like we will read it. I will read it. Our team will read it. Like the day it comes in, like we will likely schedule a call with you in the next couple of days after you send that. And we're like eager to work with folks. I think, my thought is always like, it's difficult for farmers to know how to like navigate this world of like finance and real
Yeah.
estate, right? It's just like so murky and it's, it's difficult, right? Like I think there's just a lot of challenges to that. And, especially if like in the middle of like a farming season, right? Like you just don't have a lot of time to do that. So I think we try to make this process as simple as possible, as like farmer friendly as possible. Like we don't try to ask you too many things that you won't know already. Like we will probably ask for some financials, but like if you don't have them like super ready, like, we can work with you to put together those projections and all of that. So like I hope, even if it's not with us, like I think hopefully farmers know that there's more resources and capital available now. It's like much more friendly and supportive of farmers. And I think much more conducive to working with farmers and meeting them where they're at. And then also appreciating where their operations could grow, and just welcome folks reaching out to us and starting that conversation.
Great. Well, yeah, I hope after this conversation, some people reach out to you from our audience because, yeah, I hadn't heard of you guys. I'm also not in the market for farmland. So, there's probably a reason for that. But I'm glad to hear about what you guys do. It sounds like a really good mission. And I'm hoping that if there are people out there in the audience who can benefit from it, that they will get in touch.
Yeah. I mean, I think the challenge has always been for our kind of farms, it's been like the land access issue, right? And it's like, I don't think we completely solve it, but I think like as I said, like I think we can kind of build like roads and like bridges and like get things to a place where it's a little bit easier for farmers down the road, right? I really think of our work as like just buying farmers some time, right? Like I think, and having like capital that is supportive and encouraging and like doesn't think it's like wacky that you're like planning to have a farm store or planning to do all that. Cause like I think at this point we like know it works, right? Like we know that farms are viable, like local food production is like viable, like people can make a real good effort with it, and like it can be sustained and it's profitable, and it like there's an opportunity for farmers to make it work. So like I think hopefully we're just one part of that solution, and like one part of like getting more farmers to stay farmers.
Yeah, that's important. And I think just having somebody who understands the whole process is a huge part. Like I said, I don't know a lot of farmers. I certainly don't know much about real estate or investing and all that kind of stuff. So even if you can help them understand the market forces and stuff like that, that's probably a huge help. In addition to being interested in the outcome as well, like you said, that's huge. So cool. Well, I'm really glad that I know about you guys, and I hope our audience is too. So where can people find you online or social media or wherever you want people to look you up?
Yeah, I think our social media presence is so. So yeah, no, I think the best place to reach us is on our website, thirdpartners.com. There's an inquiry form. It's a couple of quick questions like telling us about your farm, like the land you're looking at, and just like, again, some of those check boxes like, do you have an operating history of 3+ years? Do you have a revenue of 200,000 above? And even if you're below that, we're starting to work with another organization who does very similar work called Food Shed Capital, which if you haven't heard of them, they're amazing too. They do a lot of like operating loans as well. And so we're looking at doing maybe smaller projects as well. And like maybe are entertaining that. Like right now we tend to be focused on projects where properties are like $1 million and above, which sounds like a lot, but I think at this point with this real estate market, it's not uncommon to find property above $1 million. But if you've got a smaller project and like maybe your operation's a little bit younger and maybe a little bit more in the kind of early stages, like we're still interested in like hearing from you. And so like don't view any of those criteria as like as hard guidelines like that, just reach out, and like we're happy to have conversations. And even if we're not the best fit, like we have the time and interest in like supporting you to connect you with folks who might be a better fit.
Okay. So yeah, maybe you can help them find the right fit. So yeah.
I think that's kind of the hope, right? Like I think we're doing what we can, but I know there's other folks out there who are also doing this work. And I think just getting the word out to farmers like that, the land access problem, like there are more and more resources and tools out there. And like Dirt Capital is one of them, but there's a few other organizations doing really great work too.
Okay, cool. Well, there you go, folks. You heard it from Martín. Reach out, and thank you for telling us about Dirt Capital Partners. It sounds like a good thing you're doing, and I'm glad to know about it. So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks to you, Andrew.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.